Welcome back to another episode of Life's Ambition Podcast. Today we have a very exciting guest on the show. He's going to give you insight on working in the OR room as a nurse and his wide work experience with animals. Without further ado, Justin Mulholland. Justin, how are you doing, man?
It's good. How about you, Drew? How's everything?
Doing good. It's been a while. When was the last time I saw you? Vegas, right?
Vegas.
Yeah, Vegas.
Last time. Good times.
That was a crazy trip. Not gonna lie. Hopefully you didn't lose too much money, but
Whew.
I definitely lost some skin. I'll say that. The sun was definitely eating.
Oh yeah, yeah. That Vegas sun is rough, but yeah. It's such a good time. Such a good time. Family's so nice.
So what you been up to now? Yeah, what you up to now?
Just got back from Tennessee, hanging with the family, just working, just trying to just explore different options and ideas. I've got a couple different lives. My work life, you gotta be a little bit professional, and then I got my buddy as well. That it's almost like an arts collective, a skateboard company, or whatever you want to call it, where we bounce ideas off of each other and we try and incorporate other people in. So it's manifested itself. It started as an idea of we wanted to start a skateboard company. And,
Sweet.
And it's grown into more of an arts collective because we're as we're designing things. I've made a couple skateboards for him and different doing different art ideas and stuff like that. That I'll come up with something and he'll take it and run with it in certain directions and modify it, and then we kind of go back and forth, which is also manifest into making stickers as well too. So you have to ask your Uncle Mark about the stickers that we do.
Yeah, no, and you talk about skateboarding, modifying the different boards itself. What does that look like? Are you basically on an iPad drawing up different sketches? Because I know on the bottom of the skateboard is where a lot of the design piece is.
Right.
How did that kind of start for you?
I think just growing up with having skateboard imagery and the art that came out on skateboards. I've started skating at what I consider one of the highlights of skateboard, which was the early 80s. So a lot of what was driving probably skateboard sales, at least for me at the time, I was more interested in just what the artwork looked like. If I didn't care what the artwork looked like, I'm not going to buy that board, right? So it always had been quite impressionable on me and probably shaped my vision of things just through that skateboard art. And there's, people have written volumes about skateboard art and, there's books out there about it. The skateboard shape itself nowadays, at least, is pretty inconsequential. Everything's a popsicle. You have older shapes and things like that, but it was always the graphics that, always was the first thing to grab you. Everything from Skull and Bones to simple Jeff Grosso toy box drawings or whatever it might be. Skateboarding and punk rock always kind of went hand in hand, at least to me in my world, that, it's always just a natural progression of how long can you prolong your adolescence playing with toys and things like that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're Vincent Van Gogh over here in just Picasso.
I always try to experiment into different things to see where your interests lie. Even when I first started school and going to college, I thought I wanted to be a photographer. I really enjoyed photography at that time because I was young. I had no money. I had nothing else, so I started going to school for, photography. But I quickly learned that, I didn't have an eye for it and I was very good at it. So you better come up with something else that you want to do, right? If you want to make a living. So, yeah, I think as probably most people's college lives might have gone, that they think they're going to start in one direction and they wind up going in a totally different direction. But I'm kind of envious of those people that know, I want to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer or an engineer or whatever it might be, and they put the blinders on and they go for it. I think there's a really dedicated people. I'm kind of envious of them because my path was never a straight line. If you've ever read Memoirs of a Geisha, there's a line where she talked about her life, and she talked about being a river flowing down a mountain and how she hits a rock and goes a different direction, hits another rock, and then takes you in a totally different direction. But that's sometimes it's just life.
I've always been envious of those people that have one direction because
I wish
one of my close friends, his name's Eric Mira, and he always knew he wanted to be an architect, and he still is an architect. He loves it too. So I don't understand how you can be a kid, be like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. You do the schooling all for that because It sounds like I mean, we'll get into it a little bit later on. Is you didn't have that straight path, like you said, you wanted to do photography, but now you're a nurse.
Right, right.
So, what was it that brought you to nursing school? Because obviously, photography and nursing school are totally different.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, how did that happen?
Wow. All right. So that's a long and winding road. So, like I said, when I first started college, I thought I wanted to be a photographer. It'd be great. Quickly found out that I wasn't good enough to be a photographer. I didn't have an eye for it or anything like that. Still love photography. Still think it's great. Still terrible at it. Decided, what else? What else did I like? I tried to look deep inside and think, what is it that I can do every day without like coming home and wanting to kill myself or, drink myself to death or something. So then I thought, like, I happened to score really high in the English on like the SATs or whatever it was. So I was like, oh, I'll study English. Like, you just can't study English. So I said, well, all right, maybe I'll be a teacher. Like, I liked some of my teachers. I was a pain in the ass to most of my teachers, but I liked some of them. So, I ended up going to college and ended up in Towson, right where Mark lives. Got there the first day and thought I was in the wrong place. I looked around and I was completely surrounded by women. Towson, I did not know this, is a teaching college, and the population of women there were...
It's a great thing, it sounds like.
Very high, and yeah. Quickly found out that, I didn't like teaching. I didn't like talking for hours at a time in front of people. That's a big part of teaching. So after like a year or two, I dropped it. But I kept the English because you had to have a major. But at the time, I happened to be working at a club in Baltimore. I was just happened to be lucky enough I was sitting on a couch at a house that I'd rented maybe 2 weeks before from a lady that I had no idea I'd just met 2 weeks before. Was sitting on a couch, and the owners of this club were there using our shower because they pretty much lived at the club. And he said, oh, we need somebody to clean up or do whatever. I just happened to be sitting there studying and looked up and said, hey, I'll do it. I need a job. I just left my parents' house, and was figuring things out. They were like, all right, go figure it out. So within 2 weeks, I had a place to live and I had a job working at a rock and roll club. So that was pretty rad. So yeah, at that time I said, I don't like my college life. I want to get out as fast as possible. I like working at the club because who wouldn't, right? So I want to get out as fast as possible. So I dropped the teaching part, kept the English, and kept pushing through. Got out, graduated. My job at the club ended. Again, I was looking for a job and thinking, shit, what am I going to do now? I saw an ad in the paper back when, you look for jobs in the paper. There was no internet or anything like that.
Ancient there.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is early 90s. Like 95, 7-ish, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
To date myself a little bit. But yeah, saw an ad. I work at this animal hospital or something like that. And I thought, hey, I like animals, like I've got a bunch of animals now. I like animals. Got a job working at the animal hospital. Started out at the bottom. If you know anybody that works at an animal hospital or a kennel or anything like that, they'll tell you the same thing. It's a dirty job. You got to clean up dog poop, and you got to clean up dog piss. So I ended up cleaning up dog piss and dog poop, and worked my way up to the top. Became the manager. Didn't like that anymore because it's managing people, and managing people sucks. But saw the other side, because it was a kennel, it was also an animal hospital as well too. Saw the other side of the people actually doing like the surgeries and the medical side of things, because they had like a 24-hour care there. And I thought, that looks more interesting than cleaning up dog poop. I'm a college graduate. Like, I can't clean up dog poop. Although I was having a great time. I was in my mid-20s, so it was a good time. And again, I found myself at an animal hospital surrounded by women again. Which is a good and bad thing, because you're surrounded by women all day, which is wonderful. But the bad part is you're surrounded by women all day. So
Yep.
I think I had left in between. Like, I had to leave cleaning up dog poop before I could start working at like the hospital side, the animal hospital side of things. Got a job working at a grocery store, and really, asked Mark about it, really high-end grocery store, a place called Eddie's. It's in Towson. So much so that they'll shop for you. They cater to a very wealthy crowd of people. Very nice, very gourmet. I wouldn't knock them for that. The food is excellent. But by the end, I wasn't allowed to talk to the other employees. I wasn't allowed to stand in front of the building. There's a lot of things that happened there was quite comical to me, mainly because I was inciting the other employees to probably not be the best employees, I could say. Because I tell them things, these people would say, like, oh, like, I'll take whatever it is. And then you'd hand it to them, and they'd look at you, and they'd look at it, and they'd look at you, and look at it. What do I do with it now? Like, usually Maria or somebody else makes this for me. Like, do I have to heat it up? Do I put it in the microwave? Do I put it in the oven? What do I do with it? Like, they just don't know, right? Because somebody's always taking care of it for them.
Mm-hmm.
My smartass would say things like, it's yours. You can do with it whatever you want. You can eat it cold. You can heat it up. You're free to do with it as you want. It's not the answer that they wanted. People wanted to hear, the oven, 375, 15 minutes, things like that. So
yeah.
Anyway, went back to the animal hospital. And again, worked there for a number of years, worked my way up to the top again. And looked around and said, all right, what am I going to do now? Like, I've pushed this for so long. What am I going to do? And again, you're faced with a position of, if you want to work in an animal hospital, you want to be the guy that owns the animal hospital, right? You want to be the doctor. You want to be the vet. You're going to go back to vet school? Probably not, right? So I ended up getting a job just through dumb luck and networking, working for University of Maryland. I was basically a biomedical researcher. So I work with a lot of mice, rats, guinea pigs, monkeys, you name it. I probably work with that animal. So I did a lot of research at University of Maryland, which is controversial. People, would ask me, sometimes like, what do you do for a living? And I would tell them I'm a biomedical researcher. And the people that know would say, well, I can't talk to you anymore because they feel strongly about animal research or whatever. My wife, actually, who I met, had very strong opinions about animal research and things like that as well, too. We had just started dating. I was really hesitant about telling her what it is I did for a living because I knew. I ended up telling her. And she kind of thought about it for a minute. After I told her, took a little bit of convincing, but I told her, like, well, what if your mom had cancer? And this little mouse that I have here that I'm growing a tumor on is the cure someday, right? But unfortunately, this little mouse is going to die, right? How would you feel about it then? It kind of changed my mind a little bit, but.
Is that how you morally justify working on those kind of experiments? Because when you hear a lot about the different animals that researchers might be working on, there's absolutely a lot of people who take the humane route that will humanize the animal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that how you justify it? Is where I am doing this to possibly cure something else or possibly help further advancement in another area?
Yeah, at the time, most definitely. I think I looked at it as this is scientifically important. It's also really interesting because I'm not trained to do this. You got to remember, too, like at this point in my life, I've got an English degree to my name. Mm-hmm. I'm just some idiot off the street at this point, right? But, I know how to work with animals. Whatever you want to get done, we can get it done. I worked in a couple different labs there, doing all kinds of different like scientific research, which was really interesting. And I did more, not just the animal experimentation side of things. I actually did like laptop bench work as well too. But again, many times I would, get, residents that are coming in, they have to do a lab rotation and, they have these very impressive resumes that would say like, oh, I did my undergraduate at Yale. Now I'm at Hopkins Medical School and blah, 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 and things like that. Right. They have to do a lab rotation. I would say that's great. My degree's in English and I'm your boss now. So go and do this, so.
But you said you got this position from a connection, correct?
Just through dumb luck and networking. It was mainly because I knew people in the veterinary field from working at the animal hospital, and then just making those connections through there, and then just through my experiences working at the animal hospital, I was able to jump to University of Maryland and start working there. Yeah. Through there, I worked at a couple of different labs, and I started to feel, when you talk about justifying like it, I started to feel bad. Like the scientific work was interesting, don't get me wrong. It was fascinating, but I felt like it was kind of messing up my karma too. I like animals. I didn't always like what I had to do. It wasn't always fun.
Well, because you hear about the different advantages that you get through it. Like, I know it's a lot of different animal DNA and tests and scents. All are in various products that people will use, whether it's bags, perfumes, all that kind of stuff. Everything. So Yeah, like if you were to totally shut that piece down, you have to shut down everything else.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
I don't know if that's how you can also justify in your head by being like, without doing the work that I am doing now, you will not have X, Y, Z.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, but people have very strong opinions about it. You know, I understand that completely. And that's why after a while, like I think it got to me as well too. Like I just felt bad having to do some of the things that I had to do. Like getting into like gross detail. Yeah, I've had to wade through blood and excrement. At one point,
Mm-hmm.
I worked on like I said, I pushed it for as long as I could. I worked in these research labs, and again, I think I got to the point where I was just pushing it and pushing it just through dumb luck and experience. That's what I would tell people too, because they'd ask me all the time, like, how did you get here? You have no science background. I was like, yeah, I mean, my answer was always dumb luck and networking, which it kind of was. Even, working in a lab, working with mice and rats and monkeys and stuff is one thing. I worked on a surgical, again, just through my veterinary experience, I worked on a surgical research farm that if your animal model was like cow, sheep, goats, pigs, something like that, you can come to this farm. It has to be federally approved to
Mm-hmm.
do anything with animals at all. But they had the facilities there to like raise the animals, do the surgery on them, rehabilitate them, sacrifice them in the end, all those things.
Holy, like, just kill them off? What do you say, sacrifice them?
Usually, like any study that involves animals, there's an endpoint, and that endpoint is usually the sacrifice of the animal. Yeah. So
Wow.
let's say like one study I worked on, I think it was it wasn't Johnson and Johnson. It was one of those big companies like DePuy or Johnson and Johnson or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They were working on a knee implant. So they did this huge study of like 200 goats. All they were interested in is the knee. That's all they wanted, right? In the end. So
Yeah.
when you have to sacrifice 200 goats and then you're just cutting out the knee, and that's all they got $20,000 per goat wrapped up in that knee. That's all they care about. What do you do with the rest? Like that's a bloody mess, So
Yeah.
um,
Holy cow. And you were finding these opportunities through connections.
oh yeah,
Is that
absolutely.
what you would recommend to anyone like trying to just figure things out is like, hey, literally just when you have an experience or job experience, try and work those connections. Like work with your coworkers.
Absolutely,
Anyone that you
absolutely.
interact with, like if you really like what they're doing, try and get their contact information. Is that your skill and how you were able to get into these different positions? Because you talk about dumb luck and using your connections. Was it
Yeah.
just like, hey, I'm in the search for XYZ? Like, do you know anything that's available? Or how did you do it?
Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily call it a skill. My wife will tell you my social skills was probably kind of lacking at times, but I think it was I think it was just being like young at that time and just like looking like not know. My kids ask me all the time, what I ask them all the time, what are you going to do, like in life? What do you think about your future? Da da da, those kinds of things like that. And I tell them like one day when I grow up, I guess I'll figure it out too, because I still have no idea. But I think like you never know like what opportunities people that you meet in your lifetime. It could be a chance opportunity for something bigger. It could be just a minor passing, or it could lead to bigger things. You never know. Never know. Just because of working at that club, I got to be on TV once. I was an extra on this show. It's called Homicide. It's not on anymore, but it's about Baltimore. But it's just like those opportunities like that. Working at the club, I met, oh my God, name a band from the 90s, Sublime, carried their equipment, Tito Puente,
Wait,
Burning Spear,
you met
Dick
Britney
Dale,
Spears?
all kinds of different bands, like Everclear, who knows, all kinds of different bands. But yeah, just like any of those experiences, can lead you down a path. Like sometimes it's a dead end. I think, where was I after the farm? I was working on a farm, and I think that's the point where I realized too that I like what I'm doing, like medical wise. Like this is cool, seeing all the surgeries and stuff because I had to like I was running the anesthesia. We were intubating. We weren't the doctor making the incision and doing the cuts, but we were the ones running anesthesia and doing the recovery and everything like that. And I realized that I mean this is great and all, but I'm not getting paid much to do this, like at the time when I was in my 20s, it was probably a lot. But then, like, as life caught up to you and you started to realize, like, oh, wait, I'm approaching 30s, and, I'm probably going to be expected to, like, get married and buy a house or have kids or do something productive with my life, like, so I should probably start thinking about making more money. I think that was the point where I started thinking about getting into what can I do next, right? I like the medical side. If I'm going to stay in the veterinary field, I got to be the veterinarian or the guy that owns the animal hospital to make any money. What's something else I can do? I can switch to human because it's similar. A lot of stuff is similar. It's not the same, but it's similar. So yeah, so I had the idea. I was like, all right, if I'm going to do it, I got to buckle down and just go back to school, start studying nursing. So I was working on the farm, and I was leaving the farm, going straight taking classes at night, and then get up the next morning and do the same thing. It was terrible too. Like coming off the farm, I distinctly remember being in one of those huge auditorium. You ever had those big auditorium classes? It's like 500
Oh
people.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I purposely sat myself all the way in back, but there was definitely a ring around me of people that were not sitting anywhere near me because I was coming off the farm, smelling like farm. I had to tell them, like, I know, I'm sorry, like, I work on a farm.
I just sold a sheep's knee for $20,000.
Yeah, exactly. It was cutting up large animals. And that's the thing, too. Like, large animals, they make a mess. They make a huge mess. They're peeing everywhere. They're pooping everywhere. It smells. Oh, you got to wrestle goats and stuff, too, Have you ever worked on a farm?
Wrestle goats?
Oh, yeah.
No, I've not worked on a farm. You've wrestled goats
You got to get in these pens with these, like, 50 goats or whatever like that. And they're herding animals, so they're all moving around. And you want the one in back, he's tagged with number 77 or whatever. He's not going willingly, so you got to go and grab him. It's crazy at times.
Well, it sounds like you're almost practicing your Rocky Balboa skills when he's chasing after the chickens and when in his training scene. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, most definitely.
Well, and you talk about how you moved into the nursing practitioner phase later on. Now, are you still working with the farm at all, or are you strictly just on a nursing basis now?
No, I left that behind. Once I got into nursing school, I had to basically quit everything. I buckled down for about 2 years and just worked like weekend jobs, and I didn't work a full-time job because they don't really recommend that you do, because there's a lot involved with it. It's like clinicals and stuff like that. But I buckled down for about 2 years, got through nursing school at a local community college, which got me in the door again at nursing. Got a job working at a local hospital in Baltimore. I worked at an orthopedic floor, and I really liked the floor. I like the people that I work with. I worked there for about 7 years, which is what kept me there for so long, because floor nursing is a little bit different than what I do now. I like the people, and that's what kept me there for so long. That was a big part of it. I didn't feel like I wanted to kill myself every day. The work was work, of course, but you're going to work. That's why it's not called vacation. It's called work, right? But I like the people, and that was a big part of it. After the people kind of matriculated out, new people kind of come in, which happens. I ended up going to the operating room because I really liked my experience from working with the animals in the operating room. I did it with people. And again, I was at that same hospital for another 5 years after that because I liked the people. And then I worked my way up to the top of that job too. So I have a history of getting into these jobs. Even when I worked the floor, I start there at the bottom, and I worked my way up to the charge nurse. And being in charge sucked. I didn't learn my lesson, so I went to the OR, did the same thing too. Started out as a new nurse in the OR, eventually worked my way up to the top, figured out that, well, not the top, but figured out that I was in charge, and like being in charge sucks. So yeah, so then I left that OR. But while I was there, I was working on my master's as well at the time. So I just can't.
Oh, there we go.
Can't keep out of school for some odd reason. So.
Well, do you feel like when you get to the top that it hinders your growth in any sense? Is that why you hesitate to stay in that position?
I think at some points it does, but I also think it's like it's almost like a test, like, okay, you've risen to this level and we need people at this level, right? To keep things going. We want to keep good people at that level, right? As as an organization, right? You're thinking about how can you keep everything working efficiently? You've got the people in place that things are running efficiently, everything is good to go. You don't have to mess with anything, it's on autopilot. So then if you're in that position, and this is where I think I faltered, is that how do you rise above now? How do you move beyond that? That's a whole nother level of, I don't know, leadership ability, I guess, that the
Yeah.
people that make it to those executive levels, and maybe coming to the realization that, again, maybe I don't have those skills, and to step aside and let somebody else that might do a better job, um, is, I don't know, I hope, at least I hope, is in a mature level of thinking, to look at yourself and say, like, hey, maybe I'm not cut out for this, maybe somebody else can do a better job. Is that mature level thinking? Or I don't even know what the term would be, but to rise to that next level, I mean, that's a totally different person, like,
Well, it
and
seems
some
like
people have that.
yeah, it seems like you're taking advantage of all the opportunities that are offered to you out there because you said you worked your way up in one position, you immediately moved to the next to start developing your skills in that sense over
Oh,
there.
absolutely.
You said that you went to the OR room. Now, are you still a part of the OR room or have you completely transitioned to something else?
No, I still work in OR. I just do it at a different hospital now. Like I said,
Gotcha.
when the last hospital I was in the highest position I could get there, other than being the manager of the whole unit. But that lady wasn't going anywhere. But that's when that's when I came to that fork in the road of, do I have it in me to do that job, or do you bow out and let somebody else take it? Because people are tough. People are real tough,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
managing.
And I mean, I'm sure being in the OR room is an absolute grind right now. Like, are you working through the night some days and even just throughout the day? Because I was
Sometimes.
curious to see what kind of crowd you get depending on what time you work at.
Yeah, yeah. It's There's definitely different, like, cultures within the OR. The OR culture is weird, to say the least, because the patients are knocked out, so they're not really hearing what you're saying. Um,
Yeah.
so the the conversation can divert pretty quickly far south.
Like, oh, look at this guy's leg.
Oh yeah, sometimes not even about the patient, about each other. Like, they're
Oh,
in each other's
nice.
business. Like, oh, who did you sleep with last night? And, like, oh, didn't what happened to that
Nice.
dude? And stuff like that. Like, oh,
Nice. Nice. As
they,
you're operating on
yeah,
someone.
yeah. I mean, we do talk about patients too. Like, normally we
Yeah.
try and
Well,
keep
like,
keep them out of it.
do you see crazier stuff that happens at night? Because you think,
Yeah.
oh, like there's more theft or crime rates that might happen at night versus during the day. So do you see like maybe more gunshot injuries and whatnot towards the nighttime? And then in the day, you might see like, oh, this is a sports injury.
Oh, most definitely. A lot of day stuff is all scheduled. We know it's coming in. Sometimes we'll get, like, add-on cases we'll find out about in the morning. But at night, the resources dwindle. There's always a chance of some emergency coming in. Absolutely, it happens all the time. Where I am now, we're a hand center, so any kind of hand injury that you can imagine, construction workers cutting off fingers, gunshot
Oh,
wounds to
yeah.
the hands, amputated fingers, arms, things like that. Absolutely, it's also in Baltimore, so we get a lot of drug use as well too. So people shooting up and getting infected, things like that. A lot of that as well too, unfortunately.
And you
But
said you're specifically hand workers.
we do a lot of hands. That's what we're known for. But we do a lot of spine and knees, hips, a lot of orthopedic work, any kind of bone work. We pretty much do.
What's probably the most difficult like portion to work on because I feel like the spine is probably the most sensitive aspect because like one wrong tweak, boom, persons could be paralyzed. You have
Oh,
no
most
idea.
definitely, most
And I
definitely.
have no idea if it goes to that extent, but do you ever feel the nerves when you're working on those kind of people? Is like, holy cow, like
Oh,
this
most
person's kind
definitely.
of in my hands right now.
Most definitely, especially, and It's more of when, people that come in and they have diabetes and COPD and their ejection fraction, how much blood is pumping out of their heart is 30% or something. They have a lot of comorbidities and are there for, a knee replacement. They're 300 pounds and sitting in a wheelchair, but they're getting their knee replaced, like it's just
Holy.
recipe for disaster. People make it through, mainly because the anesthesiologist makes sure, but it gets precarious for sure.
Has someone ever, this may be a crazy question, has someone ever woken up during an operation on you?
Not during an operation. Pretty soon afterwards, yes. Depending on your anesthesiologist. They're the ones that really let them go to sleep or they wake them up quickly. It really depends. Yeah. But sometimes
Gotcha.
we do like locals too, where they're awake. So they can hear it. You can
Really?
talk to them. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've not
Holy cow.
yet been in a brain surgery where the patient was awake. Been in quite a few brain surgeries, like neuro, but not when they're awake.
Wait, someone could be awake during brain surgery?
Sometimes, yeah. Some, yeah, absolutely.
Does it ever just you kind of I don't know, mess around with the brain a little bit? They say a random thing, or their neurons kind of just go off all of a sudden?
Yeah, but that's what they're looking for. They'll say they'll be poking around doing whatever it is that they're doing. And they'll say "Oh, do you feel this in your left toe or something like that?" People will answer them. So, but that's a very specific surgery.
Yeah, does it ever make you nervous working on these kind of people?
Oh, absolutely. Every day. Every day.
Yeah.
That's why I always say, if you're going to die, don't die. You can't die in the OR. Don't make sure you die out in the PACU or something somewhere else. But yeah, absolutely. Every time we bring in somebody, it makes me nervous. Absolutely.
And is it especially when you guys are working such crazy long shifts, and I'm sure in COVID it wasn't that much better because there was probably a lot more procedures that had to be taken care of.
COVID really
Was that
shut.
even more
There was actually
nerve-wracking?
less. There was less.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. Especially in the beginning, they diverted a lot of resources because they had no idea, anything about COVID. So every surgery, every non-essential surgery got stopped immediately. It just wasn't
Really?
happening.
So people who need, let's just say, knee surgery, but they're not necessarily mandatory, they waited, let's
Yeah,
just say, that full year and a half.
Yep. Some
Holy cow.
some people got snuck in. The doctors would say "Oh, this person needs this for whatever reason that they could justify." It's usually pain or quality of life or something like that. Just because the insurance company's got to pay for it, right? Insurance company's not going to
Yeah.
pay for it if you just want it done. So there's a few that got snuck in, but yeah, a lot of people had to wait.
That's interesting to me because when you hear about on the news during COVID that hospitals are being slammed with people trying to get into them, whether that's COVID testing or whatever needs they had, and you're almost taking the perspective that things were slower.
Oh
I
no,
mean, was that just one? Oh, it was not slower then. Okay.
no, it was just different
Okay.
because of where I worked. I was in the OR and it got shut down. You have to have people there to, just in case an emergency comes in, somebody's bleeding everywhere, and or gunshot wound or whatever, some kind of emergency. A staff has to be there. Excuse me, but that's a team of people, which is usually the anesthesiologist, a doctor, a nurse, and a tech. So what do you do with the rest of the people? You got to ship them out to the rest of the hospital to do whatever needs to be done. Well, sometimes I was at the front door just taking people's temperature, asking them, have you had nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or, shortness of breath
Really?
or anything like that? It was awful. Just testing everybody, making sure they're wearing their mask. But it was a
And were
job.
you working crazy overtime at that point then too?
Yeah. And also because at one point, early on, when nobody was allowed to go anywhere except for
Mhm.
healthcare workers, there was a point where I was going to or from work, and a pretty major road is always busy. It's 83. I was coming home, and it was 8 o'clock at night or something like that. It was dark out, but I stopped in the middle of the road, got out, and there was nobody around. It was creepy. It was like a ghost town. That never happens.
Yeah, that's crazy. And how does your mental game switch when you're working those 12-hour shifts, however many hour shifts? How do you prepare yourself mentally for those experiences? Because I'm sure it takes a toll on you,
Oh,
especially during
absolutely.
COVID when your role is not the same.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I almost have to I have to switch into like maybe a different persona. Even when I'm talking to the patient, I almost have the same script that I'm talking to them. When I go in and I'm like, hey, how you doing? I'm looking over your paperwork, make sure I've got everything that's signed. It needs to be signed. I'm talking to them, I'm asking them the questions that I need asked. And I've got the same jokes. If I had the same patient probably too often, they probably recognize my jokes. But it's almost like going into like a different persona to like get everything through. But it's one of those things I just like. I get there and I just kind of put my head down and I'm like, I'm here to work. Like, I got to get through the next 12 hours because you're also in the OR and you're in this small area for 12 hours with pretty much the same people because, it's a super clean environment. They don't want you out walking the streets or anything like that and then coming back
Yeah.
in. So, yeah, you're around the same people for a number of hours. And if you work long enough together, like for a number of years too.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot about different like experience that you've had, and some of the people you said had gunshots when it was during COVID. Were you seeing a lot less people going in to the OR room for crime rates because
Oh,
nobody
most,
was allowed out, so everything was just vacant? There's
oh,
really
most
nothing to do.
definitely. That it's such a unfortunately for Baltimore, it's a good barometer that yeah, there was less. We saw less like crime related injuries like gunshots during that
Hmm.
time. Yeah, just because people weren't allowed to get out and get into trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like you expect wounded people to come in into your practitioner. Like, is that just a common thing that you might see then every week, or is it like very sporadic? I
Um,
mean, because
it's
obviously
kind of
Baltimore is dangerous.
Baltimore's dangerous as hell, but it's kind of sporadic for my hospital. We have a level one shock trauma, University of Maryland, which is further downtown. That if you had a serious gunshot wound, you want to go someplace like that, or Hopkins or something like that.
Yeah.
But it has happened where I walk in and out of the hospital is right by the emergency room where all the ambulances are. I've seen daily cop cars out there, blood trails, all kinds of crazy stuff walks in through there. But if you have an injury or something like that, like you just go to the first hospital.
Like I find that so interesting because I'm gonna be honest, when I watch movies, I see blood, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot going on. If it's like a fight scene, cool or whatever. But like if I see like surgery or like if there's a horror movie in there that's going on, I'm like, wow,
Yeah,
that's a lot. So
it's
for
not
you to
for
stay
everybody.
calm in those situations
It's not
and
for
be able to
everybody.
see those kind of things, have people ever told you the story behind why they got certain things? Like, let's just
Oh,
say they're let's just go back to gunshots. Like they got one right in the arm. They're just
oh,
like, yeah, I was having like a old Western rodeo duel with a guy where we took 20 paces. Like, do they
absolutely.
always talk to you about it?
Oh, I always ask too. I always that's part of my jokes that I joke with people. I'll bring it up. I'll be like, "So, what happened?" And everyone's got a different story. We had a kid not too long. He was about 17. I think this happened like a couple months ago, and he had an entry wound here and an exit wound here out his elbow
Whoa.
from a gun. Right. So how does that
Mhm.
happen? He had some cockamamie story. He's some young kid. His mom, of course, was covering for him. But what we were thinking he was doing is he was probably posing or doing some gang signs or something with his gun and just went off and just happened to go in and out through here. I ask people all the time.
Wow.
Fingers, a lot of finger amputations and stuff too. I get that a lot, and I always ask people too, like, what were you doing? A lot of table saw injuries. If you have a table saw or a circular saw, yeah, be careful.
Yeah.
A
So,
lot of those.
well, I'm sure you see a lot of construction work. You always hear about how they're trying to update the technology where they might move a hot dog like uh, wiener all the way across to the handsaw and it'll
Right.
stop right
It'll
before it
stop.
cuts off.
I've seen
Like, are
that.
you seeing? Yeah, no, it's crazy. And are you seeing that kind of development in, let's just say, the doctor's office? Because in physical therapy, I hear that schools now are having this system where there's robots that will say "ow," and you can have voice conversation with them. Like, are you hearing stuff like that happen in doctor like your schools and so on and so forth, or even in your own office?
It's come with AI and even telemedicine, like what we're doing now. That was all started at COVID. People realized, they were like, wait, I can sit at home and I can talk to my doctor on my computer. Like, that's amazing. That was pretty at the time. It's been a couple of years now. Like, that was pretty big. But yeah, there's just more and more technology coming into it. We have at least 3 robots that we use to do surgery, both
Robots?
for knees and hips, and that's just to do a knee. 3 different robots for a knee. I've seen GYN robots. There's definitely a spine robot as well too, and that technology is there. It's just kind of like the knee robot just maps out the knee, and it won't let you make certain cuts. Like, it'll block, the doctor, if they had something to demonstrate with. But if the doctor's got your knee on a surgical field like this, and he needs to make certain cuts at certain angles to put your new knee
Mhm.
replacement in there, this machine won't let him make certain angles, or it'll direct them, like the depths of screws that they're putting in and everything like that. Like, it's pretty amazing, some of the technology they have.
That's actually really cool because I hear that Google is basically creating this Fitbit almost, and the AI technology with it, where it's not diagnosing you with what you may have, but
Right.
it's giving you different reads on whether that's your heartbeat, and it goes even further on like if you have like any symptoms, you could be going towards this like possible disease, or even like it checks your cardiac pulse, like it
Sure.
can kind of like help restart you. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And we talk about these robots. Like, are you dealing with them personally, or is it the doctor that will actually deal with them?
It's 2 different people. Usually the doctors, who's usually the ones like making the cuts or doing any kind of incision on a person.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually the ones driving it, but there's somebody on the outside, usually the vendors, who are instructing the doctors as well and saying, if you want 3 degrees Varus, we have to go up in patella size for this, that, or the other, which is a really interesting job too, being a like a medical rep of some sort too. They like to hire
How
a
so?
lot of they like to hire a lot of young, a lot of attractive, both men and women. So, not a bad field.
Hey, you know what? Like you said at the very beginning, it helps and it hurts at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely. But
That's
you might see some blood, so I don't know how you deal with that.
ooh, yeah, yeah. I mean, you already know how I deal with it. Are like what separates then between you and the doctor? So they're working with the devices. Are you just helping them if they need any assistance with, let's just say, prepping the person, or
Oh yeah,
you?
absolutely. In an ideal world, like the doctor, the patients are there to see the doctor, right? They're not there to
Yeah.
see me. So he's the one mainly responsible. Um, Ideally, in a perfect world, the doctor wants to walk in, have everything that he needs, plus all the things that he doesn't even know that he needs, but it's already there in the room, right? He just wants to
Hmm.
walk in, do his thing, and then minimal interruption, and then be gone. On to the next one,
Hmm.
you know. Um,
Yeah, because they're probably on such a tight schedule with however many patients they may have in a day, right?
sometimes, yeah, and then sometimes, like if something goes wrong, or if it's just more complicated than they originally thought, it just takes more time. You just get backed up with things. But my whole part of things is just getting the patient there for one, making sure everything is signed, everything's in order. If you don't have the consents and they touch a patient, making a decision on them, it's bad news.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
you
all
know,
legal rights.
Oh yeah, make sure that they haven't left like a sponge in there or instrument or something like that. That's important too. I got to deal with that. And sometimes I'm not even scrubbed in on the surgery, but I'm still responsible that if the doctor left something on the inside. So, well, yeah, in an ideal world, they just want to come in, do their thing, and then go home. I guess go play golf or spend whatever millions of dollars they're making.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I got like one last question here. I was wondering, because you've been in so many different positions and have done so many different things that have led you to the point that you're at now, is there anything that you would want to tell someone who necessarily doesn't know? And I know we talked about how, it's to build those connections and so on.
Right.
Is there anything else that you would recommend to someone that may not know that start or is coming out of college? Because you had a lot of different experiences in your 20s,
Oh yeah.
and you were just coming out of college or graduating at like 22.
Sure. I definitely did not graduate at 22. You know, but man, if I was coming out now, one of the things I would say would be, like do what you love, of course. If you get up every day and you hate you going to work or, like it's just miserable, it's probably not what you want to be doing. Money isn't everything. Can it make your life a little easier? Hell yes, it can. Hell yes, it can. You pick a job that, brings you both is really I think the magic recipe. Lots of money, and happiness and things that you love. Do I make a ton of money? Hell no, not at all. Do I like what I do? Yeah, absolutely. It affords me a lifestyle that I enjoy. I work 3 days a week. Right now, at least, I'm probably going to pick up some more hours and more jobs. But for right now, I work 3 days a week. That's Monday through Friday, 3 days a week. And then I got weekends. That's not bad. I'm gone 12 hours a day, but I've got, 4 days off on the other time. When most people are working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, I just kind of condense it down. But, again, do what you love. It took me a long time to figure that out. And it took me a long way of wrong turns and everything else. But I think doing what you love, and then in the off time, you have this free time to also do what you love to do. I, want to start a skateboard company or, buy records or something. It affords me that free time. Yes, money will buy you a lot of things, but, there's some things that money can't buy you as well.
I think that's awesome that on your free days you're working into the skateboard company. Just expand your realm. Like you said, you're trying to find different positions. Like for me, outside of school, like I hope to do this along with my career on the side. Like, why not take advantage of the opportunities that you have in front of you? And like, if you're passionate about something, why not give it a try? The worst you could say, is that you tried it and it didn't work out.
Right.
I think a lot of people rather be in that direction of things than never trying it at all.
Oh, absolutely. And doing anything like art or something like that, right? I like to make art. I use spray paint and stencils and kind of make funny things that way. I don't do it to make $1 million, I give it away to people. If somebody's like, oh, I like that, I'm like, hey, take it. Some people might say like, oh, you can probably sell it. Yeah, maybe I could sell it, but I don't necessarily do it to sell. If somebody wants it, I think that's wonderful. If it goes for $1 million, I think that would be wonderful too. It's obviously not, but I do it mainly for the enjoyment and mainly sometimes just to make people laugh too. If I can like make a little sticker and somebody sees it somewhere and they laugh, then that's a win for me. That's all I really care about. And if someday somebody picks up and they go like, hey, did you see this guy like nobody's ever heard of, like look at this crazy stuff, then it happens. If not, then it just dies some obscure weirdo, so it's fine too.
Hey, why not, right? I think that's absolutely amazing, man, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast today. Like, it means the world that you're absolutely here.
No problem, man. Enjoy anytime. I wish you the best of luck.